for today's families? Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't know if the NDP government has different definition of today than I do, but we know for certain the families they're referring to when they started that campaign certainly aren't any better off now. Just ask the people in rural Nova Scotia who've lost their jobs if they feel they're better off now. I know 1,300 people in Cape Breton and on the North Shore who've lost their jobs or given up hope don't feel they're better off now. The 2,200 in the Valley don't feel they're better off now. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians feel like they're being taxed to death. They don't feel like they're getting the bang for their buck that they work so hard for. And that buck, that dollar, is not going near as far as it used to. They're paying more tax on most things they buy and use most today. The very things we need to survive. The things that are essential for families of today. They worry about jobs for themselves and their children and their grandchildren and for the future generations. Will they be able to survive and remain in this province to earn a living and raise their family? I know I'd love to see my family educated here, stay here to work and raise their family. I'd love to see grandchildren stay here. But a lot of us on this side fear that that's not going to be the case. Mr. Speaker, they worry about economic development and our small towns being able to sustain themselves. They watch and read week after week of job losses in the rural area of Nova Scotia, a crisis which Stats Canada tells us has now even spread beyond the rural areas. Now, with potentially dangerous labour legislation, employers and employees throughout the province are concerned, worried about who could be brought in to make the decisions in their business, decisions that will affect how they do business here. How will their business survive? And how will the future businesses look at investment here? We're hearing in the Law Amendments Committee about how they are concerned about it and how it will affect their business and how it will affect jobs and their own investment. Nova Scotians know it won't help create new jobs, and they worry even more that it will affect the few jobs we still have in this province. I tell you, Mr. Speaker, the NDP are not working to protect the economy of Nova Scotia. The most recent reports show that Cape Breton and the North Shore have lost 1,300 jobs, as I just said, in the last year. The southern region fared off even worse, lost 1,700 jobs in the last year. And of course, as we've heard time and time again, the crisis is felt. Maybe worst of all in the Annapolis Valley, which to date has down 2,200 jobs from this time last year. Those Nova Scotians who are fortunate enough to have a job and go to work every day, those who are fortunate enough to pay the taxes, and those who have helped fund the province don't have it easy either. They find it hard to make ends meet, Mr. Speaker. Some have to decide between heating fuel or groceries. That's not a decision I want people to have to make, Mr. Speaker. Working people are proud and want to work and pay their own way, but it's getting more and more difficult every day. But we hear from the other side there's no crisis. With rising tax rates, rising fuel costs, and upcoming hikes in power rates, those people who've considered themselves lucky to maintain steady employment are finding the salaries and wages they do make are able to get them less and less each month. And it's not just the unemployed that are struggling, it's all of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, we heard the other day of the member from Preston speak about taking your change and put it in a cup, and at the end of each month add it up. Nickels and dimes go a long way, and people in Nova Scotia feel they're being nickeled and dimed. The government keeps trying to sweep this information under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist, and ignore that there's even a crisis going on in Nova Scotia. We all know, especially those of us who live in rural Nova Scotia, that this crisis does exist. When a federal NDP leadership candidate was in Nova Scotia, he acknowledged there was a crisis with job losses and named it as one of the issues that he was most concerned with. The job crisis in this province has become so real that even the federal NDP have taken notice. But, Mr. Speaker, they're in opposition federally. And the provincial NDP who were in opposition at one time were worried about this crisis and these job losses as well. But now they're in power and don't seem to want to admit it. Here at home, the government insists there's no problem, that the strategy is working, that there is a plan in place, and they stand behind it. That the thing about a plan, Mr. Speaker, they're wonderful to have, and putting all kinds of work into one may give off the illusion of progress. But plans, by definition, only work a part of the time. This is one of those times where the plan just isn't working, Mr. Speaker. About the only thing worse than having no plan at all is having one that doesn't work and refusing to do anything about it. Refusing to admit you didn't get it right the first time and sticking to a plan that it isn't working gets Nova Scotia nowhere. Under the Jobs Here plan, we're just treading water, Mr. Speaker, and the arms and spirits of Nova Scotians are getting tired. Time is ticking, and it'll not be a long time. It won't be a long time before more and more Nova Scotians give up and move away. We can see how exhausting it is by watching month after month Nova Scotians leaving the workforce. Some simply give up, and others pick up their lives and move to greener pastures. End up paying taxes there, raising their family elsewhere. That's not good for our province, not good for our economy, and it erodes our tax base. Now, Mr. Speaker, unless part of the NDP plan was to chase Nova Scotians out of the province or to beat the ones that choose to stay into submission, this plan is failing. The plan is failing, Mr. Speaker, but we shouldn't focus on the fact that it's failing. That would be a waste of time and of no use to Nova Scotians. Nova Scotians who are waiting for opportunities and jobs. We need to focus on fixing the problem and changing the plan or creating a whole new plan, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to give every Nova Scotian who's willing to go to work the opportunity to do so that individually and as a province, we can prosper. I don't think anybody's surprised that the NDP is failing. I don't think it surprises anybody at all that their plans are not working. The commitments aren't being met, and they're focusing on all the wrong issues. But, Mr. Speaker, there is a process that deals with this issue. It's called an election. When the next election rolls around, voters in the province will hold the NDP accountable for their ineffective plans and broken promises and pointless legislation. And that's when we'll find out if the people of Nova Scotia are happy with the NDP's plans. And, Mr. Speaker, just last night I said I've got no problem with the NDP saving us some campaign work. But I do not support them doing it at the expense of the people in Nova Scotia. As elected members of the House, Mr. Speaker, it's our job to make sure things are done in this chamber and throughout government. They're not only done in the best interest of Nova Scotians, but they're done in the best, most effective way possible, regardless of what side of the House we sit on. And like I said before, having a plan is part of the process. The NDP didn't make a plan. The NDP did make a plan. We can't take that away from them. I'm sure the plan was made with the best interests of Nova Scotians in mind. However, Mr. Speaker, having a plan that does not work, a plan that has proven not to be working month after month when we look at the job numbers, is only slightly better than having no plan at all. And it has to be reviewed. The first step in the road to recovery for this NDP plan is to admit the problem, Mr. Speaker. Until now, the Minister of Economic Development and Tourism, as well as the Premier, have denied there's a crisis. They've done so in this House, Mr. Speaker. They have insisted that their plan is working, that jobs are being created, and things are looking up, despite all the evidence month after month. Their federal counterparts are concerned, and they're concerned about the job losses. Now, Mr. Speaker, until the government acknowledges the problems we are facing every day in this province, acknowledges the growing job crisis, acknowledges their plan is not working, acknowledges that they need to do more for the people struggling to make a living in this province, there isn't much we can do to help them, Mr. Speaker. The PC caucus recognizes the problems. The other opposition has pointed out that they understand there's a job crisis in the province. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to discuss employment and job opportunities in Nova Scotia. You see, a good government looks at opportunities amidst challenges, Mr. Speaker. Yes, we recognize that there are areas in Nova Scotia that are hurting. And I can tell you with great certainty, Mr. Speaker, that we understand the anxiety people experience when they hear the words shutdown relating to paper mills and other industries. Mr. Speaker, we are here to let Nova Scotians know that we continue to work to help create good jobs and build a strong economic future in the light of these challenges. Because, Mr. Speaker, unlike the opposition, our government has not given up on those communities or industries. We didn't in the past. We are not doing that now. And, Mr. Speaker, you can be rest assured that we won't in the future, because we have a plan. It's called Jobs Here. We are taking a different, more organized and thoughtful approach to this issue, Mr. Speaker. Unlike the opposition, of course, who sat idly by and watched as Nova Scotia endured 20 years of the weakest growth in Canada. That's right, Mr. Speaker, 20 years of the weakest growth in Canada. This government has invested more than $200 million in jobs here, Mr. Speaker, a strategy that will put an end to those 20 years of slow economic growth, a strategy that will help our businesses compete, a strategy that is focused on innovation, a strategy that will help Nova Scotians learn the right skills for good, high-value jobs. And, Mr. Speaker, I might add, a strategy that is working. Mr. Speaker, let's look at the facts. If the opposition wants numbers, we'll give them numbers. How about these, Mr. Speaker? In a global economic downturn, our government has actively worked with partners involved in game-changing opportunities like the shipbuilding strategy, which will create 11,500 jobs, Mr. Speaker. It will average at least 8,500 jobs every year, Mr. Speaker. Our GDP will rise by 2.4%, creating opportunities in all areas of the province, including our rural communities. And how about the development of Lower Churchill, Mr. Speaker, which will create thousands of more jobs? These numbers will have a real impact on Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. They translate into work for a generation and bringing our children home from the Western provinces. They translate into Nova Scotians staying at home, working at home, putting down roots at home, and thriving at home. And I have more numbers, Mr. Speaker. We have partnered with DSME, a partnership that will create hundreds of direct jobs. We have invested in hundreds of businesses through the Credit Union Loan Program, the Industrial Expansion Fund, soon to be the Jobs Fund, Mr. Speaker, the Nova Scotia Business Development Program, and the Productivity Investment Program. The official opposition Liberals spoke out against our partnership with DSME and creating hundreds of jobs in Pictou County. And the Conservatives proved that they are against preserving infrastructure in Cape Breton when they came out against the plan for Cape Breton Rail, which, I might add, Mr. Speaker, runs through many Tory constituencies. Mr. Speaker, we've said it before and we'll say it again. The bottom line is this: We are in the business of creating a better economy here in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, of course, we would like to see better employment numbers in Nova Scotia, but unlike past governments who buried their head in the sand, we know there is always room for improvement. And the fact of the matter is that every province has seen challenges in recent times. We cannot deny the fact that Nova Scotia is not completely immune to the global economic situation happening right now. Mr. Speaker, the opposition is playing politics with a very serious issue in rural Nova Scotia: jobs. What we need here is real leadership, and that's what we have, Mr. Speaker, real leadership, not more rhetoric. If they still want to look at numbers, let's try the rate of unemployment under their government's record. Cape Breton unemployment peaked at 20.7% in April 2001 under the Tories. It was at 26.6% in March 1997 under the Liberals. And interestingly enough, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for Cape Breton South was the Minister of Labour and Minister of Economic Development around that same time period. The North Shore hit 13.3% unemployment in April 2002 under the Tories. Incidentally, while the leader of the third party and MLA for Cumberland South was the then Premier's Chief of Staff, and it was 17.7% in March 1994 under the Liberals, Mr. Speaker. Both of these opposition parties saw higher provincial unemployment rates when they were in government than we have today. And so I ask, what did they do to help Nova Scotia in the long term, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we know more work has to be done, but I would like to point out that as it stands today, Nova Scotia continues to have the lowest unemployment rate among the Atlantic provinces. That's because jobs here is working. We are providing steady leadership for long-term economic growth in this province, for every region in this province. Mr. Speaker, this government understands that Nova Scotians want to see results from jobs here, and that's what we will deliver to them. However, only counting jobs would be short-sighted. Mr. Speaker, our government also measures increased productivity in Nova Scotia businesses. We measure whether more of our businesses are more competitive globally. And Mr. Speaker, we measure the amount of training, providing our workers with the right skills for good jobs. Mr. Speaker, through jobs here, we've invested in LED roadway lighting, Great Valley Juices, AF Terrio & Son, Pro Poly Cushions, Maritime Pride Eggs, Nova Elite Farm Services, Classic Granite Countertops, Biomedica Diagnostics, and Mr. Speaker, I could go on. And if it weren't for jobs here, we wouldn't have invested in more than 177 businesses in every region of the province through Productivity Investment Program. We have proven with investment after investment that jobs here is for all Nova Scotia. And it's jobs here that is helping us bolster the Nova Scotia economy. It is jobs here that is helping us create good jobs in rural Nova Scotia. It is jobs here that is helping us get the work done. It is jobs here that help save 2,000 jobs at the along the South Shore. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I would hope that the member opposite discusses with his federal cousin his party's concerns about the job losses and cuts to Service Canada, which will see the loss of over 100 jobs in Cape Breton. And I would suggest to the member opposite that he attend the protests about those job losses in Cape Breton on Saturday, Mr. Speaker. That's a huge concern for the constituents of Cape Breton, Mr. Speaker, and I would suggest that the member opposite take those job losses very seriously. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly happy to use the last 10 minutes for the late debate to talk about this topic. And the Minister of Economic Rural Development and Tourism take advice of his federal cousin and start getting concerned about job losses under his watch. And again, I could really care less about what Paul Doer thinks or what any of the federal Conservative ministers think, because that's not why we're here. None of those guys have elected us. None of those people have elected us, and none of those people are responsible to us, and we're not responsible to them. So let's talk about what we can control here in this province and talk about what the real issues are. And you know, if we want to get serious and talk about rhetoric and politics and misleading and those types of things, let's look at the reality of what's happening here. Halifax is booming. Halifax is getting stronger and better by the day, and that's a good thing for our region. It's a good thing for people. It's certainly a good thing for Nova Scotia. But rural Nova Scotia is without question hurting, and it's hurting badly, and things are getting worse. And you know, it's interesting that the member from the government side talked about we'd love better numbers, and sure, you know, the growth has been slow. The numbers are frightening, and the growth is the worst of any province in this country, 1.9%. So I don't know what we're trumpeting. I'm not really sure what we're celebrating, but I think we got a lot of work to do. And again, you know, what the frustration for this side, certainly for myself, is that I listened to the Minister of Economic Rural Development and Tourism use the rationale and the reasons why we're not doing better, and it's always, you know, the former governments, and that seems to be the theme coming from the government side. So it's the Tories and the Liberals from the last 20 years, and I don't think that answer is acceptable anymore. Certainly, I don't think that Nova Scotians are happy with that. 2.5 years into a mandate is enough time. You've had the ability to affect change. You had your ability to put your philosophy into these departments, particularly with economic and rural development. So the proof is in the pudding here. Where's the government's plan, and what exactly are they doing? And I think if you look at the numbers and look at what we can see in terms of the job, the difficult job situation in this province, and you can certainly see it. So the minister will use that. It's the form of government. So he'll also talk about, well, the world markets are hurting our development. The world markets are certainly down, and it's tumultuous times across the globe. But that doesn't mean that we halt policy. That doesn't mean we don't make strategic decisions on the $400 million we spend in economic development. That's through the IEF and through the economic development programs here. That's a significant amount of money. There's no excuse. If we're spending that money, there's got to be value in it. And where's our bang for the buck? Well, obviously the numbers aren't showing that. So we're celebrating something. I don't know what exactly that is, because there's not many measurables that we're looking at here. One thing the minister did say in question period, he tabled, to the roaring applause from the government side, he tabled information about the potential growth of our exports. Not sure if he was meaning to talk about economic development within the province, but what the article he tabled was related to exports. And if we're celebrating our exports, that means we're doing well in international markets. So I'm not sure if you're tabling an article that talks about the success of our exports, and we're talking about our succeeding in international markets and in international trade. So which one is it? So if the world markets are stunting our growth, then why are we talking about our potential exports in 2012 and beyond? So, you know, let's be clear and be honest, and I did talk about this last night. This is the majority government, and it's no longer the Liberals and the Tories, and the Premier's in place, and the Cabinet's in place, and the government's in place, and you know, what are those decisions that are going to impact on Nova Scotians? This is your ball game now. And again, when I talked many times when we used job numbers and talked about question the minister in question period, what I've heard from multiple members was, well, what are we supposed to do? There's a downturn in the world paper markets. We can't be the savior. We can't help Bowater. That's not our responsibility. New Page isn't our responsibility. But now there was a decision made by the government to support Bowater. So again, that was a conversation that I had with multiple members from the NDP government. And now there's $50 million base in place to support that. So again, the point of mentioning that is there are policies that you control those policies. And I did mention this last night. So that's a decision that rests with you as a majority government. And the point of this is that the government and the economic and Rural Development Minister has tools to promote and to launch growth in this province. And we're talking about the Industrial Expansion Fund, soon to be the Nova Scotia Jobs Fund. When some of the government members were in opposition, they referred to it as a slush fund. And other than changing the name and changing some menial parts of this act, I don't see how it's changed. It's still controlled by the cabinet. It's still under the watch of the front bench. And if we're making a real change, everybody, middle bench as well. My apologies, Minister. But if we're talking about a different direction, we're talking about change for the better and those types of things, then I've said it again. I've said it many times, and I'll say it again. We've got to have some way to get the private sector, the major players in this province to have input on how we spend these hundreds of millions of dollars. And we had a presentation today at Economic and Rural Development at the committee, and that was the, some of the questioning in terms of what the Jobs Act would be was with respect to that. How can we not consult in a major way, in a significant way, the experts who generate revenue, who generate profits, and who employ Nova Scotians? I don't understand it, and I said it when the minister introduced the Jobs Fund Act, and I'll say it again. I think we missed the big opportunity. If the government talks about being different than the devils who were there before, and it's always the responsibility of the former governments, then this was an opportunity that was missed. And I think that without the input from businesses, we missed an opportunity. The government's job, particularly in these dire times of economic turmoil, is to set the parameters for business. It's about the business environment. So where do your policies affect change? That's where they affect change. Your job isn't to run the private sector. Your job isn't to completely influence the private sector. Your job is to set the parameters and let natural economics, what's going to work is going to work, what isn't, and let those things take their natural course. That's what the economy does. That's what, capitalism and free markets do. So, that's where we should be in this province, and I don't think that renaming the IEF particularly does that. And secondly, one that's been near and dear to me that I still am struggling to understand, and we talk about the Jobs Here program. We need some form of job targets to make this thing legitimate. $400 million as we heard today at committee, and where are the targets? And it's not the department, the representative that was there today echoed the same thing that the minister said. We don't want to use a job number because we don't want to create a ceiling and we don't want to limit ourselves to a particular number. That's not how this works. You don't establish a number by picking it out of the air and then working towards that number. The number develops from your legwork, from your homework on how you look at these things. You do your research to identify what your core competencies are in this province. We talk about consulting with industry players, utilize the tools like NSBI to attract investment, and then you identify those prospective developments that you may have in the province. When you do all those things and you follow that path, what results is a range of potential job numbers that you can look at. So you create a range by doing that homework and figuring out where you're going to properly invest. So, I don't accept that it's a ceiling about a number of jobs, and I certainly I don't understand why that's the case. We should have numbers earmarked for these investments. And what we heard from the department today at the committee was that, well, we want to stay fluid, and we don't want to be too rigid in terms of this money. That, to me, not putting words in her mouth, but if that's the way we're approaching this, that sounds like a slush fund. Leave the money off the side until we're ready to make an investment, and that's what it was called 10 years ago and 5 years ago and 3 years ago, and that's what we're still calling it now. So ask any business if they would invest in something not knowing the end result in terms of revenue and profits. Ask any business if they've gone to a bank with no business plan and got money. I don't think that's the case. So, these are the things that we have to look at. And finally, just to finish off, it always becomes about what I would do, what we would do if we were government, and what I would do if I was the Minister in Economic Development. And for what it's worth, what I would do, certainly this is, and any of the cabinet members would know this becomes your vision. If the honor's been bestowed upon you, then it becomes your direction and your vision in this province. And You establish your philosophy by doing your homework, working with the chambers, working with the members of the department, and figuring out where those job targets are, and we go from there. And with that, I'll take my place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The time allotted for late debate has now expired. I will recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish you would now leave the chair and the House resolve itself and the whole House on bills.
Motion carried. We will now take a short recess until the chair takes her place.
Order, please. The Committee of the Whole House on Bills will come to order. I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Tonight, Madam Chair, I rise in my place to speak on Bill 102, an act to prevent unnecessary labour disruptions and protect the economy. And we are tonight speaking on the title. And that's quite a title to be putting on a bill. And I find myself in a very unique spot here tonight as I speak to this House of Assembly. I find myself in a place where I actually agree with the Premier. Because when the Premier got elected, he said he was going to bring a different type of government to this province. And there is no question in my mind that that's exactly what's happened. It's different in the fact that they don't listen to the people they said they were going to listen to. They invited a whole lot of people to a wedding, but when the wedding ceremony was over, they didn't invite them to the dance. Now, Madam Speaker, imagine, just imagine what it would be like if tomorrow you were to go to the grocery store. And when you got to the grocery store, Madam Chair, somebody stopped you outside and said, "You can't go in. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in and I'm going to pick up all your groceries for you. And I'm going to tell you what's good for you. And you just stay here." And you'll say, "Well, you can't do that because I have a budget." Doesn't matter. I know what's best. I'm the one that can tell you what's best. So that person will go in and they'll pick up the groceries and they'll come back with an order that you can't afford. And they will drive your budget in your home out of whack. Not much different, Madam Chair, than what this government is trying to do to business. And we had time and time again in this House, we had members come forward to the law amendments, and they spoke about how bad this bill would be for their business. And these weren't small players, they were major players. And the reason there weren't so many small players here, Madam Chair, is because they couldn't afford to leave their business. But when I was home on the weekend, I spoke to a lot of small business people, and they were worried. They were very concerned as to what this bill could do to them. And that worry increased. That worry increased when they found out that Sobeys and Michelin and Clearwater were concerned. Because they felt if people of that magnitude, who employed that many people in our province, was worried about this bill, how would a small company like theirs be able to survive? And what would the impact be? Now, we've talked here in this House time and time again about what our job is as members of this House of Assembly. And I do believe, and I said this before, I believe everybody in here has a deep respect for what we're supposed to be doing. But our first and foremost job is about representing the people that have voted for us and sent us here. So then we hear from the government benches that this bill is going to take place, it's going to happen, it doesn't matter. And then we wonder, and last week when I had an opportunity to speak, I asked the Minister of Energy if he had talked to some of the people in his constituency. And he shook his head, yes, he did. And then when I asked who he spoke to, he just shook. Because he didn't want to admit that he had sat down and talked to some of the biggest employers in this province, who had come to them to look for help, to the 3 PICTO members who had said, this is not good for our businesses. People like Sobeys, who are proud Nova Scotians, been in business for 100 years, who are saying, we can't afford to have this. And what did the 3 members from PICTO do? Pretty similar to what they're doing now. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Wearwell Garments sat down and said the president had talked to the 3 members, and that the 3 members were going to take their concerns to caucus. Well, as I recall, he didn't think too much of the reply he got back. And it doesn't need to be repeated here because them 3 members already know what he had to say and how he felt about it. But you got to wonder, we all have to wonder, who is the government listening to? Who are the members on the government side of the House actually paying attention to? Because I can tell you, when I sat in the House of Assembly, and when I sat over in law amendments, and when Colin MacDonald spoke, I listened. And I listened very carefully. And he offered his thoughts as an international company based in Nova Scotia because he loved Nova Scotia. He wants to stay here. And he offered his thoughts. And he said, this is a bad bill. But if you're going to go ahead with this bill, there are some things that you might want to change. Now, the member from Halifax said, little Sable Island, he tried to build on what he said. He said, you know, you said these were good amendments, and I want to get a good understanding of these amendments. And that's a little bit of a paraphrase, but that's basically where he was at. But then, when Mr. MacDonald was asked the question, will those amendments help this bill, or should this bill even be in place? His answer was no. This bill is not good for Nova Scotians. It's not good for the people that I employ, and it's not good for us in a business environment. He said there was too many challenges already here in Nova Scotia when it came to looking at it. He said there were all kinds of challenges. One of the challenges was the high rate of tax. One of the challenges was a high rate of power. One of the challenges was a high rate of gasoline. These are the types of things that they have to factor in to every business decision that they make. So now we hear from the government, we've got a stranger going to come in who knows nothing about your business, but they're going to tell you what's good for you. They're going to say, this is what you need to do. And it really wouldn't matter to them what it costs. Very similar to the person that went and picked up your groceries and doesn't care that you have a budget and you have to live within that budget. You know, My colleague from Victoria the Lakes said, when we first started down this road on Bill 102, that if you don't have employers, you don't have employees, and you don't have an economy. My colleague from Glace Bay just finished talking in the late debate about the lack of jobs here in Nova Scotia and how the jobs are going down the tubes and how this government is investing money from a fund that at one time they said was a slush fund, but now they changed the name, so it's okay. They said, it's all right, everything's good. Yet stats can tell us that things aren't good, that things aren't well in the province of Nova Scotia. And I would be the first one to say that regardless of where we lived, it is challenging times. It is challenging times. But what we need to do is we need to meet them head on and be passing legislation that addresses them, not creates more problems. So I look across and I look at the members on the other side of the House, and they're good members. They're good people. And I even have one over there waving at me, because he's not allowed to talk, so he has to wave. But I can imagine what the sign language is going to be. But I look across and I see some very, very fine individuals. And I see people who I thought, and I hope, are sensible. And I was wondering, Madam Chair, just who in the world are these people listening to? Because, you know, Madam Chair, when we were in this House and we were doing Bill 100, we had a parade of people coming into law amendments, and they told us what they thought, they told us what their fears were, and still the bill went through. And here we are now on Bill 102. We've had an army of people come forward and tell us what they believe to be. We've had letters to the editors saying that they're worried about what's going on. We've had people stop members on the street to say, this shouldn't be, we can't afford it. And of all times, when two of our biggest industries are in trouble, we're looking at shoving through something that doesn't mean anything. And the other day in the House, Madam Chair, I had the opportunity to ask the Minister of Fisheries a question. Because I'm not sure, I'm not convinced that all the members on the government side of the House really understand this bill. And I asked the Minister of Fisheries, who did he talk to? Who in his area was he listening to? So, Madam Chair, through you, I'm going to ask him again. Who did he consult with? Did he talk to A&C Quinlan Fisheries in Shelburne? Did he talk to AJY Fisheries in Clyde River? Or Leo Atkinson's Fisheries Limited in the Southside Shelburne County? Madam Chair, did he speak to any of these people? People who he has a responsibility to, first as a member, second as a minister, and thirdly, as a cabinet member, as somebody a part of a majority government. Did he talk to any of those industries who supply employment to his community? Did he ask them what they thought of this bill and how it would affect them? Did he talk with Atlantic Pearl Seafood Company in Clark's Harbour, or R. Baker Fisheries Limited in Lockport, or Cam Jam Trading in Clark's Harbour, or Cape Breeze Seafoods in Barrington Passage? These are all major employers. People who are in an industry that this minister has practiced all his life, and from all reports was very good at it and very successful at it. But did he talk? Did he talk to any of those business people? What about Cape Sable Lobster in Barrington Passage, or Sea Clam in Lockport, or D&E and Son Fisheries in Woods Harbour, or Dockside Fisheries 1988 Limited in Woods Harbour, and Charles and Robert Blades Limited in Clark's Harbour, or Carter's Ocean Products situated in Lockport? What about all those? All of those businesses who employ people in his constituency in one of the most important industries in this province. The very people he's been put in charge of as Minister of the Crown, who look to him for guidance, who look to him for support, and look to him to make sure whatever he is putting forward is for the best health of his industry, the industry of which supplies so much employment just in his own community. Does this minister listen? That is the question that's being asked. And it's not only being asked in Shelburne County, it's been asked in other areas. Not very long ago, the member for Victoria Lakes, the member from Cape Breton North, and myself had a chance to visit Northern Victoria, the seafood co-op up there. And we had a chance to sit down. And you know that we spent an hour and a half with that fella. An hour and a half. And we talked about issue after issue and after issue. And not once, Madam Chair, not once did the first contract arbitration come up in the discussions. That wasn't part of the worries of that fishery co-op. It wasn't anything on their radar screen, Madam Chair. They were worried about wharfs. They were worried about lobster catches. They were worried about price. They were worried about a number of things, Madam Chair. But they were not worried. They were not worried about first contract, FCA, first contract arbitration. Thank you. They weren't worried about that. They didn't even know it existed at that time. No, Madam Chair, I respect you too much. I wouldn't go down that road. But at that point, that wasn't even something that was on the radar screen. And I guess that's what's kind of worrisome. Because, you know, there was a meeting held over in Dartmouth. And a member of our caucus went. And the minister said, you really can't stay. There's not enough lunch. Now, I want to point out to you, Madam Chair, it was the skinny fellow from Inverness, not the fat fellow from Cape Breton West that was there. So she shouldn't have been worried about the food. She should not have had to worry about that. She should have been more interested in making sure that people were being heard and that there was proper representation being made. I could understand if she was worried if I was showing up and she was trying to feed me. But Madam Chair, you know, one day in Dartmouth, holding a consultation meeting with some of the major players in the province of Nova Scotia, not even invited, doesn't really cut it. It really doesn't do what needs to be done. Listening to all of those people who came to law amendments, time after time after time. And all of them had the same message. And yet I hear from the government and the members of the government that they're wrong. And I can't help but be amazed at how to think that a company like Sobeys, who created 10,000 jobs in Nova Scotia, who took over companies right across our country, were able to do that, and yet they don't understand the very essence of what's going on in this province. That's hard to believe. Now, Madam Chair, there's a whole lot of people over there. There's a whole lot of people over there who want to talk. They want to talk. And you know what, Madam Chair? I'm sure.
Order, please. The honourable member for Cape Breton West has the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. But you know, with all due respect to the chair, any of those individuals who want to get up and speak about this bill, I'd be glad to take my place so they can do that. I'd love to know. I would love to know what the Minister of Fisheries, I'd really like to know who he talked to, who the Minister of Justice talked to in his constituency, or the member for Pictou East, who did he talk to? Because obviously, these companies that are located in those areas don't know what they're talking about. Now, I'm sure that the Minister of Fisheries talked to some of these people that I listed off. He's a very, very smart man. And I'm sure, oh, you listen, I'll go down there during the election and quote that. And I want you to know that the people who sent you here want you to represent their wishes. They want you to represent their issues and not the issues of the big Labour friends of the government of this province. You know, Madam Chair, It's really quite interesting, all the rabbit tracks that are coming from across the way.
Order, please. Chatter's getting a little loud. It's difficult to hear the member. I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
You know, Madam Chair, that's the first time I've ever heard that I've been hard to hear. But I take your wisdom in that, and I understand what you're saying. But you know what? The best way to do that, the best way to quiet me down, is for them to get up and tell us exactly what your constituents are telling you. Because you know what, Madam Chair? We're getting calls. The ones on this side of the House, we're getting calls from some of their constituents. And what we're hearing is not that these people are representing my best interest. What we're hearing is they don't hear. We're hoping that Santa Claus all brings them batteries for their hearing aids. Because, Madam Chair, they don't listen. They didn't listen last year with Bill 100. They're not listening this year with Bill 102. And I could go on for hours to talk about what's happening. But the Minister of Justice has something to say now, which is really quite unique. You know what? He's over there saying the sky is falling. If he was in control of it, it would be underneath the ground. It wouldn't be falling. So don't tell me the sky is falling. Listen to the people that you're supposed to represent, the people that are in your constituency, the people that tell you and came here and told you. But no, I forgot. You knocked on the doors all weekend. You'd have to knock on them because everyone locked them.
Order, please. Order. Have a seat. If everyone's ready to carry on with business today, we'll proceed. And I would remind the member that his comments should be directed through the chair, not to an individual member across the floor. I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And you were right, I should be addressing them. They just happened to jump over you and land over the other side. We'll get back to our Minister of Fisheries. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it through the chair, just the way the rules say. I just want to know if the Minister of Fisheries consulted with DeVoe Fisheries Limited in Barrington Passage, Inlet Seafoods of Clark's Harbour, Island Marines. Now, I can tell you, Madam Chair, if they want, on the other side of the House, I'll go get the yellow pages and read every business that lives in Shelburne County, because they are the ones that are being affected by this. Or they can take their turn and speak to the issue at hand. Well, it's really amazing, Madam Chair, it's really amazing. It's really amazing the fact that for a group that's not allowed to speak, they have so much to say when others are talking. That is pretty amazing. Now, Madam Chair, I could go on. When I look at you, that's all I think about. Well, Madam Chair, I want you to know that I've come to a realization. Okay, I've come to a realization. Madam Chair, you're the only one from that side of the House that's listening. You're the only one who is taking the time to actually hear what's going on. And I would bet if I could ask you the question, Madam Chair, have you talked to the people in your constituency? I know what the answer would be. Yes. The answer would be yes. Because you are a good member who concentrate on doing what's right for the people that have elected them. Madam Chair. Leonard speaking. I did hear a noise from the other side, but we're going to be focused. We're not going to let the rabbit tracks, or in this case, the pony tracks, take us away. We're going to stay with you, Madam Chair.
Or the horses. I thought they were horses.
You know,
They're horses now.
Order. The honourable member for Cape Breton West has a job to do. It's his time to speak. I would ask the other members to give him his time that he has allotted. I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
thank you, Madam Chair, and I certainly appreciate your candor in this whole issue. I guess I'll go back to where I was. I really feel that you are the only one that's listening. Now, I know that the Minister of Transportation is listening because he told me the other day he always listens when I speak. So I know that he's listening. But after that, the pickings get pretty slim, Madam Chair. The pickings get a little slim. But the reality is this is very serious business. What's taking place in this province will have an impact not only on the members of this House, but our families and our generations to come down the road, Madam Chair. The members on the other side take this lightly. And you know, I was trying to be in the spirit of having a little fun because it is Christmas. And I went out, I was going to buy a gift for all the members on government side of the House. Cool. But all the Grinch's ties were gone. Cool. But anyway, Madam Chair, this is a very, very serious issue. And you know what? That side's not taking it serious. Not at all. They've drank the Kool-Aid. They believe everything they were told. They don't think that the business community of this province, they do not believe that the business community of this province knows what they're talking about. They do not believe that anybody other than Dan O'Connor knows where the world is at. And Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, that's not correct. Madam Chair, this is a bad bill. This bill is not good for Nova Scotians, it is not good for business, and it is not good for the future of this province. And I would request that each of those members talk to the people they represent rather than the front bench and really find out how they feel. And if they want a list of people where they can start talking, just look at the list of people that came to law amendments, Madam Chair. With that, I'll take my seat.
Shall clause number 1 carry? Carried. Ask the clerk to ring the bells. No. Yeah. I heard two. There were two. The Committee of the Whole House on Bills will come to order. I'd ask the clerk to proceed with the vote on clause number 1.
Mr. Landry.
Yes.
Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Estabrook.
Aye.
Ms. Peterson-Rayfuse.
Yes.
Mr. Corbett.
Yes.
Mr. Dexter. Mr. Steele.
Yes.
Ms. Maureen McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Paris. Absent. Ms. Jennings.
Yes.
Mr. McDonnell.
Yes.
Mr. Beliveau.
Yes.
Mr. Pereira. Absent. Ms. Zan.
Yes.
Ms. Kent, she's absent. Okay. Ms. Conrad.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
Yes.
Ms. Raymond.
Yes.
Oh, she's here. Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Epstein.
Aye.
Mr. Press.
Yes.
Mr. Ramey.
Yes.
Mr. Skabar. Mr. Wynot.
Yes.
Mr. Morton. He's absent. Ms. Birdsall.
Yes.
Mr. Boudreau.
Yes.
Mr. Burrell.
Yes.
Mr. Gadet. Mr. Sampson. Mr. Glavine. Ms. Whalen. Mr. McNeil.
No.
Mr. Manning McDonald. Mr. Dontremo.
No.
Mr. Bailey.
No.
Mr. Bain.
No.
Mr. Porter.
No.
Mr. McMahon.